Welcome to Deep Dive, where we discuss relevant topics and issues for everyday people and offer an honest, thoughtful perspective in hopes to encourage and inspire you to look beyond the surface, to better understand one another, take a stand for each other, and promote higher level thinking for a better outcome. My name is John Crude. I'm your host, and today we have a discussion. We have some new changes and events that are going on today, some things that are happening. And we find that in Palm Beach County is supporting LGBTQ plus a history resolution of celebrating a history month, LGBTQ plus history month in Palm Beach County schools. So how are we feeling about that? Who wants to go first?
I think it's refreshing.
Yeah.
I do.
Okay.
I really think that it's that Palm Beach has taken this stance of saying that, hey, they recognize that this is a part of diversity, equity, inclusion, that it's real, that it's here, and putting that level of respect on it with what they are doing in the school system. I think it's very refreshing.
To my core, like I respect the community. I have friends in the community. I love the fact that they're able to be free and be themselves. Why we have a month dedicated to the history of it, I I don't understand it enough to know why there's a history behind it. Like why are we celebrating a full month of history? I know that they've been oppressed on their what do we say here? Their lifestyle, I guess you can say. But I don't know. I just feel like I can understand Black History Month. I can understand American Indian Month, the history behind the oppression behind these people and what they've gone through in the last thousands of years. I'm exaggerating, but you know what I mean.
Right.
I just don't understand this. And maybe it's just lack of understanding, lack of knowledge, lack of all of it, but it doesn't make sense to me.
I have this thing where if it is my opinion and my values may not be of everybody else's values, and that's okay because I live in a world that has various perspectives and views. Mm-hmm. For me, I don't have children, but I do have a bonus daughter. And I feel as if when we talk about history and LGBTQ is a sexuality choice. And so therefore, when we are discussing that, we have now brought sexuality into the school life. I do understand that I believe at one point in time, sex ed was a thing in high school that they taught and things like that. But my stance is that sexuality and your choice of that begins at home. That's something that is taught at home because there's a lot of different intrinsic factors that play into that. And so therefore, I do agree. I understand with Black History Month because it is a race that has made history, Indian, Hispanic heritage, those various months. And then with that being said, I feel as if, and if I'm correct, I believe October is also Hispanic Heritage Month. So what does it do to that? Is it a underlying statement? Is it a political move from the Palm Beach County? Because I'm actually really shocked that the Palm Beach County School Board would even approve of that when that side of town is, as a native Floridian, is there were Republicans out there. So that's really shocking to me, very, very shocking to see that it was actually approved and made, local news.
That is interesting. I feel like I read an article that the folks on the board, I guess it was all Democrat, I guess up there, and I think there was one person that opposed it. And I think it's interesting that you mentioned about being Hispanic Heritage Month as well, and what kind of moves, because we know in politics sometimes there's ulterior motives, unfortunately. right? And how, one vote can kind of outshine, something else, and the fact that it's related to, kind of like the sexuality, I would say I agree that, it kind of, that's something that's like more personal, it's at home, and it kind of, just like a lot of laws, it opens doors.
I do feel that there is an agenda. Going back to the piece here with the History Month, this is the only group that is claiming 2 months in the calendar year. I don't know that Hispanic heritage have 2 months. Pride Month is June. Now they have Pride Month and October, LGBT History Month.
Yeah.
That seems odd to me. And then and there are certain states where they have Pride Week outside of June. So I get it. All to you and whatever it is that you've overcome and your identity and understanding your whatever it is, the self-love that comes, whatever it is that you need to go through to discover yourself. But why do we all have to acknowledge this all like throughout the whole year? Everyone has to acknowledge the celebration of this month. I'd love to have a second month.
Yeah, and it's
Black
real.
history should have like 5 months. I mean, those are groups of the Indians, forget about it. They should have all 12 months because these are groups that were killed off. Literally full genocide, slavery, like they talk about oppression. The least we could do is give them a second month, right? But I don't know. That's why I feel like there's something at brew here because it's with the school system and it goes back to what you said, Soraya. It's a sexuality choice. It's not something ingrained in. I get it. So, the whole thought is you were born this way, but I don't know. I just feel like there's something more taking place here. And again, I don't want to get canceled. Maybe it's just lack of understanding of how it all works, but I need someone to make it make sense to me.
That's an interesting perspective as I listen to you guys talk about it. And it's what's fascinating to me, the biggest part of this is that where it's where there are those of us who view this largely as a choice. And I have spoken to a number of individuals who, for them, it is not about a choice. It is about them being truly their authentic selves. But what has not happened is that they have never been allowed to be their authentic self. So the comparison that we make here sometimes, and I understand that, and I even understand saying, hey, why 2 months? Why can't we just take the 1 month and just combine all of that into it? But my perspective is one more so of where those that I have had the opportunity and the pleasure of having those relationships where they share who they are with me is not from a standpoint of them saying, hey, this is something that I choose. It is them being their authentic self. The difference, I think, that I see between them and what we talk about when we talk about Native Americans or we talk about Black History Month and all of these things that are there is that when we talk about the LGBTQ community, what they have been able to do is something that those other groups have not been able to do. And that is to take and suppress who they are because it was not safe for them to do it. Imagine if they would have come out and if they were able to do that. We can't, your race, your color is what it is. You can't hide that. You can't any of those things. But they have been very quietly, because that was where they were and where they were placed at in all of this, there wasn't a choice. So where we sometimes see it as a choice of this is a lifestyle that people are choosing and, they have the choice of being straight or gay. They don't see it that way as being a choice, but it's being, when am I allowed to be my authentic self? I think it's the interesting piece that I find in this when we talk about the LGBTQ community. Just something that I've seen. Again, so I was just speaking in regards to people saying that, okay, we see it as a choice. Yeah, there may be some folks who are who use this as a lifestyle, and I think we do see some of that. We see that there are those who say, "Hey, I tried this out, thought it was something that I want to do. Guess what? I'm not. This is who I am. And then others who they are truly being their authentic selves. And let's be honest, it is not that the LGBTQ community is new. It's not. They have been around. If you go back to biblical times, you will find the existence of this. So when we talk about it, and we talk about it from a historical standpoint, or them saying that, hey, this is something that they want to talk about. Okay, is it something that happens in the home? Is it now we deal in an era of where social media and all of these other things that are out there where, you learn about different things. Where do you learn them at? Where do we want our children to learn this information at? If they don't learn it from us, they're going to learn it from somewhere. Where do we want them to get the information from? And maybe if we look at and we're saying that, okay, we want them to have a history of, maybe there's a certain point in this or whatever, putting some parameters around that. I get it. Yeah. I get exactly what you're saying with that. But let's be real here. I've got a 12-year-old here at home who talks to me and who knows about those things. And we've never had these conversations, but he's having them somewhere. And so what do I do? Do I disengage and say, nah, I don't want that to happen? Is it my place? Where does it happen at? Is the question, because they're learning and they're learning somewhere.
That goes with a lot of things though. Drugs, sexuality.
Exactly.
Yeah. So there's like a lot of things that it definitely goes back to what both of you have said. It starts with education at home. What is it that we're teaching our kids and how we're preparing them for this ever-changing planet that we're in? There's always something new that's wrong. I was telling my friends and actually my parents too. I remember being a teenager saying to them, you just don't understand. You're old. And honestly, my kids have told me this, and I'm like, you know what? You're right. I don't understand this world. Like, how is it that this click-clack of internet works? I feel like my parents. And I think every generation that passes by is just going to get more challenging and more challenging. Mm-hmm. But how do we, as adults, educate ourselves, right? So that's why I keep on saying, like, don't cancel me. Maybe I just don't know. What are we doing to further our understanding of how this new world works, so that we can now educate our offspring, our kids, because we don't want them to become the next victim of depression or suicide or anything that is such an increasing number right now. So I definitely get that. And to your point about the oppression and the hiding yourselves, I feel like, at least I know with my Afro-Latinas who have tried their best to change the way their skin works because they're so ashamed of how they really look and who they really are, that they've tried their best to try to hide their side, to the point that they even changed the way they talk because they want to talk white, so I get it, the hiding themselves, but I feel like that's also something that every other ethnic group has gone through. I mean, I absolutely, I'm not sure where the bleaching of the skin is a whole thing too, like, please educate too, but I feel like at one point or another, we were like, these are groups that were born this way and still feel like the way that they have to survive is by like suppressing who they are because of the fear of what kind of backlash they'll get from their peers, their community. So I understand, again, I don't want to take away from their, that community's history. I just feel like fair is fair. Let's honor each group, because at one point or another, our groups have all experienced similarities in this type of oppression and how we try to find survival tactics to overcome this. So I just know I'm still learning.
Yeah, I agree with you. And maybe it's an understanding of where the differentiation comes in with pride versus having a month of where this is what we're doing.
History. Yeah. Like,
why the differentiation? So I get what you're saying with that, and why the need for two. I think the educational component of it is very much, because it's real. Let's be honest. And I get the opportunity to go into the schools sometimes and talk to students, both at the college level and sometimes at high schools too. I'm shocked, stunned, and amazed by the number of children who live at home and live with their parents and who go through these feelings of isolation, depression, these thoughts of suicide, these things that are all right there. And they are in homes, in what we would consider very stable homes. But these children have thoughts that would amaze you, that blow my mind when these children walk up to me and they talk to me about the things that they are feeling. Imagine if you add that component to their well-being as well. What does that mean? When you look at some of the things that for individuals who are in the transgender community and how they are the murder rate of what's happening simply because of something that they choose to, again, be their authentic selves. And this is something that when I'm on campus and I'm hearing young people say to me when they come up to me and they talk to me about the opportunities that I have with my organization, and they'll say to me, Miss Wanda, is it okay if I bring my authentic self to the business? What does that mean for a kid to say that?
Yeah.
And there are so many different pieces of that when we talk about acceptance and truly understanding and what that means to them. So I think that for me, I guess, Yoni, that I'm with you on that learning curve of just truly understanding so that then we are better able and better prepared to whether it's something that happens at home and in the schools or how we do this. And maybe it's looking at not so much the what, but how, and making it make sense. That's the piece that needs to be added to it.
All great
because
comments.
the game has definitely changed.
Keeps changing.
Always. It's always changing. Absolutely.
Well, Wanda, you made a valid point on the how, because that was my biggest question when I found out about it was how will you teach this and teach human development? How will you? Yeah. So that's the reason why I was just like, no, it probably must be a political stunt then, because there's too much how questions that need to be answered that they don't coincide, that I'm just like, I don't understand. Is this just like, this sounds like a move, a statement that's just trying to be made, because the how questions have not been answered as to what exactly in history are you teaching? Because it could be that it is a Black man that has made history, but as you mentioned, wasn't during that time allowed to be his authentic self. And therefore, it has now become a Black man who is now openly gay, who has stated that. And that is the history of his life, of what the understanding of the curriculum needs to all tie together, because it's a very blanket, vague statement that we have approved for October to be LGBTQ History Month, because it could be any of them. It could be even a white person. It could be a Hispanic person. It could be any race that is just now openly coming out, but we're giving their history. But then now that allows a door to open for other questions to come into play. And so a curriculum, those questions have to be answered, because it's not making sense in that aspect.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember taking a trip to New York, and I was in a neighborhood and they had a bookstore. And I was walking with my kids, and in the bookstore they had books in the window. Obviously they're big up there, and they were celebrating stuff, and it was new for me, just kind of seeing it, and the book materials and some of the things that it kind of covers. And there's some books out there. I mean, there's stories in there about mommy and daddy have a swingers party, and this and that and the other. And obviously it's a bit kind of polarizing for people to kind of see parents to see things like that, or soon to be parents trying to figure out, because it's tough enough just in general, just like trying to raise your kid, right? You have enough challenges and things like that in today's world, let alone all right, you have a new factor, information and who delivers it. And it's powerful, just like in the church where they say, or in the Bible, far be it, I'm not a, super, religious person or anything like that, but talks about the tongue and the ears and everything like that, the things that you take in, the things that you listen to, and there's influence, there's power in words, there's power in numbers. You take a group of people and you take the majority of people that go this way or think this way, people tend to go along with whatever the majority is. And you have powerful groups in the world, in the states and locally, that have power and influence, that happen to where things move. You say something and then it just shuts down. Another group can be disenfranchised and nothing happens. Things get overlooked all the time, but everybody ignores those things. Why is that? Why is that? It's always looked past and overlooked. And then the people that have been fighting, because I've seen people switch sides, and it had nothing to do with that they had hate in their heart. I think about a movie called Fences with Denzel Washington. And he's looking at his son, and he says, "Dad, why don't you love me?" He said, "I ain't got to like you." He's like, "But do I do right by you?" Right? And that's the biggest thing. It went somewhere along the line from people just saying, "I want to live my life. I don't want to get hung from a tree. I don't want to get burned alive. I don't want my kids to feel threatened down the street and get shot. I just want basic life." And then we got so sensitive as a society where now it's just like feelings to such a degree. I know somebody now that works in the education system and in school and university, and there's an individual in the class, and the person's attitude, they're in the LGBTQ plus community, but she's telling me like this person's attitude, like they work together in a group, she's fine with that, but this person feels so entitled. When people give a certain amount of leverage on certain things, power can go to an extreme. It goes from one thing, seeking one thing, to now it's like so far to some degree that it went well beyond just basic rights. I everybody on this call, that I know you personally and have a great heart. And, I have LGBTQ in my family. And I remember the first time just being, introduced to this and was like, okay. I remember a good friend of mine that came out and expressed this to me at a younger age when I was in my early 20s. Had no idea, right? So there's these moments, and the first time you find out something or something is new to you, I didn't have a knee-jerk reaction to kind of look at my friend during that time and just like, oh man, back up, whatever. It wasn't any kind of homophobic anything. I love my friend. We'd been friends. Nothing's going to change the experiences we had and everything. I had to process some different things because we do think differently, and lots of people in the world think differently. And it never crossed my mind to say he's not my friend or anything like that. I think from a place of understanding, like a lot of different, topics, whether it's discussing gender stuff or whether it's discussing racial stuff or LGBTQ and so on. But that whole concept where we hear sometimes like, and I question this as a parent, I've seen the evolution. I'm a kind of individual where I paid attention to the evolution of things. I've seen adults that have moved from one thing they stood on to now they stand on something else. Either it was influenced by professional life, it was influenced by all the different areas of life that affect their life, the quality of their life, how they get their money, how they get all these different things. You hit people where it hurts, right? And so it's not that these things don't matter. It's like, what happened to the basic essential things? And, it's just like, does somebody do right by you? If I'm hiring or something like that, I've had people in organizations I've interviewed, nothing ever crossed my mind to feel like, oh, I'm not hiring them because they're part of this community. Had nothing to do with that, in anything at all. And we've hired people. I've worked with colleagues that are wonderful, amazing people. And I've also seen some people in the community that have a certain kind of attitude they walk around with, a certain kind of entitlement, there's an extreme of some things. It's like you can have a woman and there's an extreme version of a woman that's in the community where it's like 10 times that. Is that necessary? There's boundaries on everything. And so it's like we're in this society where, the soft society that it's framed a lot, where we want so many rights that it just blurs the line between having structure. There's a breakdown in structure in the home. There is a breakdown in being able to cope. Kids are growing up and not being able to deal with anything. And while just like we have, kids that go to school, your children go and you say, look, I remember my mom looking at me and said, look, somebody lays a hand on you, right? You defend yourself, right? But, the whole sticks and stones and all this other stuff like that. And it's just like life will throw punches at you. Any adult who's like achieved something or been through something, like you've been through a lot, right? And some people do have it worse. Like some people maybe by society standards aren't attractive. And so people say things, they say, you don't know my experience. I've been through this. Somebody who may be overweight and they get called out. And people talk about body shame and things like that. And it is unfortunate because even back in high school, I always felt for people that got picked on. I always stood up for people that got picked on. And I never cared for the bullying and all these other things. So we went from a society where bullying was probably the biggest thing in the schools, where it's like, all right, we don't like bullying. So it didn't really matter whether it was LGBTQ, it didn't matter whether you were overweight, it didn't matter whether it was something or whatever. It was like, you do not mess with people, period. You do not target people emotionally, do not target people, whatever. But now it's become so specific that everybody wants their piece in the pie. And it's gotten so complicated that people are so stressed out. People can't speak straight without feeling like they're offending somebody, even though they have love for the person that they would invite to a barbecue, that they would sit down, but it's not good enough that you can come to my barbecue. It's not good enough that you met my child. You still feel like there's something else I need to do for you. It's like being in your job and you look at your company like, you got to raise, you got to raise, you got to raise. You still feel like it's not enough because every time you get more money, you want more money. So maybe you have bad spending habits along with that. So you keep needing more money, but there's something internally that needs to be fixed, period. So you can't really satisfy that. And lots of people are going to therapy all the time because they keep running into walls in different avenues. And so there is always a point where you got to look and say, at what point do I look inside of myself? Because you enable people. And that's where the things go to an extreme. And that's where some of these discussions don't happen, where people can really look and say, okay, who's monitoring what, right? We all have our own lives, but who's monitoring us? If you don't have anybody in your life that's going to help to kind of keep the gauge on you, to say, hey, because nobody knows when it happens. It's like growing up and you're like, hey, man, little Ricky, you got taller. And little Ricky doesn't recognize he got taller. He's like, I did? Nobody knows where the changes happen. You just know you're there. You just know when in a relationship things went bad. You don't know where it happened, where the left turn happened. You just know that you're there. When you're out there and whether you come from trauma, there's so many avenues and everybody wants to be like, you're wrong. You listen to the things that somebody didn't say rather than the things that were said. It's easy to say nobody's perfect. Like some of a lot of folks that adopt a victim mentality as it's put. And there are some real life victims out there. And there are people that play victim and it gives a bad look. Just like when I see Black men that do certain things, I'm like, God, I take it personally. I feel like it makes us look bad. If I can look and I see certain things where somebody's representing or speaking up for Black folks, and I say, I don't agree with that, but they're representing me. If I can think that, then somebody in the LGBTQ community can sit there and think the same thing. So who's representing and who's leading it? Because there's a higher power at play that makes certain decisions and choices. And half the time, sometimes people in the Black community got things that are happening and decisions that are being made. And some of them don't have a clue about it. And they're like, I didn't sign off on that. I didn't agree with that. But things are moving in that direction. And it just moves that way, whether you like it or not. And somebody who has power is going to push it hard enough to where people are just going to go with that flow. When you see a group of people running, they're like, all right, I guess this is where we're going. Right. And that's just what it is. And I feel like we're at a place in society where there's enough distraction. There's enough pain. There's enough stress. I talk to more people, even some of the people that just get, they're highly overwhelmed. You got parents that just want to be able to provide. You start off wanting to live a certain life. You have your own personal troubles. Parents that are stressed out just being a parent. So they're not necessarily giving the time to the children. And I'll bring it back to the LGBTQ thing. And it's just like people lay back and accept anything. They say you don't stand for something, you fall for anything. And people are afraid to stand. And that's where I see the problem. People become so fearful that they can't speak up. But then you have one group now, the power level is so high. It just goes beyond. It's like, yeah, let's just keep going. And people feel scared to speak up and say things. And it's just like, but the speak up part in my mind is like, don't misinterpret it as by like in the community. I would look at the community, LGBTQ community, and don't misinterpret people speaking up because the same way they have the right to speak up. Don't have it flip back the other way around where people can't express and we can't have a conversation because out of emotion, it's very difficult.
I think that having the opportunity to, because historically, yes, when you start looking at the LGBTQ community, it crosses the gamut of, we can go back and we can look at history and just off the top of my head, just some that I think about that come to mind, from Josephine Baker to James Baldwin, who were known, to Anderson Cooper, who is here today, or who some of us may have heard about, Larry Kramer, who was a writer from the 80s, who was very involved in, he was a literary writer, and who also during the AIDS crisis that impacted this country, impacted the world actually. And what did that do? How did that change some of these things? So whenever we talk about from a standpoint of just understanding some things, I think it does have its relevance and its value. Do we understand what those parameters are?
Yeah.
That we are talking about here with this when we start educating. I think that also understanding the history, it helps a lot of times for us to say, okay, maybe as a Black woman, me seeing someone who looked like me, think about how proud we were when we got a vice president who was a Black woman. One of the first things that I went out and did was I got a shirt that says my VP looks like me. And I got one for my little people, the little ladies who are in my life, that because it was a reflection of them being able to see themselves and how they were able to identify. Mm-hmm. Can a child, a young person who is of the LGBTQ community and who doesn't have exposure to, or who doesn't know anything about their history, and know that there are individuals who have been out there who have done amazing things too, but they haven't been able to identify because they simply don't know. I don't know. There's so many different components and pieces of this that I think where it has the ability to make a difference, but what does that look like?
Exactly. So that's why I was saying there needs to be some understanding as to how and what is being taught. Because when you just make a blanket statement like that, everybody's going to be hands up. And that also even goes into the LGBT community may also be hands up in uproar because they don't know what also is being explained as to their history. Because they have a voice themselves. And that's where I agree with you, John. The rights part, there needs to be a parameters for things like that. And I'm pretty sure in all aspects, the same way that just because one Black woman says something doesn't mean that I agree with it. And the same thing for the LGBTQ community. I'm pretty sure just because one person says something, it does not speak for all of them. And
not a blanket statement.
It is a blanket statement. It's a very, very blanket statement. And there needs to be some clarification and understanding for all parents. All parents. It doesn't matter what their background is. All parents need to have a better understanding. What are you teaching my children? What is being taught? Because I am the one that is sending my child off to school to get an education. I should be given that much of a right to know what exactly is being taught. And then we can sit down and have a conversation.
Absolutely.
And that's what the article didn't give us enough of.
You know what? That's a big piece there. There's a lot of talks about this. I remember it was first introduced in the Miami school system, and Miami declined it. So it was vetoed completely out. Yeah, it was completely vetoed out. But I think it goes back to what everyone is saying. There's just so much uncertainty with the information that is laid out, even in the presentation of this new potential curriculum. What does it mean? It has to be completely broken down so we have all a good understanding of exactly what you're teaching. Because, we want to make sure that our kids are being prepared for success. And that goes with all the information that is laid out in this specific category and in any category. So it's very important for us to just have clarity. That would help everyone. And the whole idea of embracing the community would be so much more better and more welcoming if we had more clarity on what it is that we're going to be continuing on with the generations to come. What is your stance? Not that I want to be myself, my authentic self. Okay, but what does it mean to ensure that we're bringing in this whole entire educational piece into our school system? What does that mean with how we interact with each other? How do we ensure that we're doing right by you, but then also do right by us and give us the information? So I think it goes back to just learning, clarity, setting that structure.
Do you? Can I pose? I'm going to pose a question. Do you think like in the school systems, if they like similar to like universities, like you have different curriculum that's there, but if there were optional courses, much like young Black children might say, you know what, I want to learn more about my Black history. And there's specific courses that they can take to learn more about that. You have kids that have the right to say, you know what, this is how I identify. This is how I feel comfortable. I want to take a course to learn about more about this for myself. And it kind of empowers the parents because you ask any parent, they're going to say, this is my child. I want to raise my child how I want to raise my child.
Mm-hmm.
Not blanketed, instruction to say, okay, this is the way it's going to be for all these kids and this is what they have to do per se. And it kind of gives respect to, each and everybody to some degree. So in terms of history is a powerful thing. You kind of teach people. And I mean, history is written by some individuals. It's a whole nother topic. But nonetheless, like, what do you think about that?
I think it's a great idea because at the same time, you're not imposing yourself on someone. And I think about, I know a couple that is a part of the LGBT community, and they're just like, all this loudness that's going on is not something that we're of. They're just like, we're living a normal life. The
Right.
days of us being rocks being thrown at us, or names being called directly at us in front of, we take our children to school, we pick up our children to school just like every other typical functioning family. There's a lot of loudness happening, which is what you're saying about John, about the power.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what is piling up. And it's then now taking a different view of them as a community because they're now viewed as one. And a lot of people within the community are just like, all of this is not necessary. We are content. We are happy. We just ask that you treat us like human beings, just like you treat everybody else, because that's what we are. We are human beings. And to me, I believe that it should be an option. It should be an option as parents to be able to choose, hey, since I'm going to speak for myself, I can't really give you good Black history because I grew up in a real Caribbean household. And I can probably give you more history on the Caribbean than I can in the United States. But I would like, I'd ask my children, hey, do you want to learn about this? You want to learn more about this? You want to learn about the history of that? By all means, go for it. In the process, you may find out about certain people being of certain backgrounds and in going a little bit more in depth in their lives. But to sit there and to force it and impose it upon everybody I think it's a very far-fetched thing to do rather than giving people the option.
So I feel like if we had the clarity, the structure, the curriculum, it wasn't so much about sexuality, but more about like the individuals that were just crucial pioneers in this, or, game changers or whatever. If that is the curriculum and it's going to be something that it's really important for, not even, I don't even want to say it's that I would consider it to be important, because I might consider it to be important, but someone else might say it's not important for whatever the topic is that we're trying to teach our kids. But if it has real good in-depth information that will make my kids say, okay, that's something I didn't know, that's actually helpful. I actually can cherish or appreciate this person because of what they brought to the table. I wouldn't want to make it optional, because if we make that optional, and again, it goes back to the clarity, and we have the curriculum and all of this and all that, what other type of groups of learning or learning about different groups would we then say we want to make that optional? Like, I wouldn't want Black history to be optional. I wouldn't want Hispanic heritage to be optional. I need you to learn everything that happened, because it becomes optional, and you have certain areas, like, let's say, and I'm putting it out there again, please don't cancel me.
Fair enough.
But like, if Idaho, it's optional to learn about American Hispanic heritage, and it's maybe predominantly white. I don't know, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Then the whole culture of that specific group is going to be lost in that state completely.
Okay.
So then I feel like, no, like, let them learn. Like, they need to learn about Black history. They need to learn about Hispanic heritage. They need to learn about the Asian American, Pan American, whatever it is. I'm sorry, I'm learning all of these pieces, but because then it's going to get lost. The history, the individuals that were game changers for those specific groups can get lost, but it goes back to what is that curriculum? Because if it's not going to bring depth, knowledge, insight to my child, then maybe it just doesn't need to be there. But if it is, and it's going to be of value for them to learn and appreciate a group of people, then yeah, they need to learn that, because then it's going to get lost. And that's why we have certain areas that are removing important books. Like I think is it Broward in Miami? They're trying to remove or reduce the slavery or time. I forgot what it was, but it's like, no, you need to learn about that. You need to understand and appreciate what happened there. So that's why I say if it's going to be permanent, if it's going to be like a given thing, then it needs to come with depth.
All great. I know we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. I know we're at the top of the hour and everything. All of you, thank you so much for joining tonight. This is a topic I think we can just chat on for a good minute, and it will just kind of like, it will just keep feeding itself, and maybe we can do a part 2 sometime. But Yanni, thank you so much for joining on. Wanda, thank you so much for your feedback and everything.
My pleasure.
Great. Soraya, thank you so much. Let's do it again. All right. For those of y'all out there, go ahead and leave your comments below if you like anything that inspired you, made you think on this discussion. Go ahead and leave your comments below, and thank you all for joining.